animator versus the machine.
Begin.
On today's podcast, we have a very special guest. He is an actor, producer, director, writer, podcaster, and voice actor who's been doing this for over 20 years. He has 4 podcasts, which one, 8 Tiny Reindeer, has been made into a graphic novel, which you can purchase over here somewhere. I post this. Yeah, right there. Perfect. He's also been in films like The Tuxedo with Jackie Chan and Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. But the breadth of his work is in voice acting. He's done things from Sailor Moon to The Adventures of Sam and Max, Angela Anaconda, Cat in the Hat, Jacob Tutu, Cyber Chase, Kingdom Force, and is the voice of Woodstock in the new Snoopy Show for Apple Plus. I'd like to introduce Rob Tinkler.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on the show, Alex. It's great to be here.
We said off screen, when I was going through your IMDb, I realized you were on one of my favorite shows I could only catch on a Sunday at a random time on YTV called Power Stone. It was like the One Piece. It was like One Piece and Power Rangers mixed together, and I loved it.
It was a great show. It was really well done. The animation was beautiful, and it was so it was one of the last show. Well, it was a dubbed show, and so I would, they would send me the script. I'd quickly read the script, and then I'd get up in front of the mic, in front of a big movie screen, size screen. And they would have this rhythm band where you would have all the dialogue written out. But I would always have a golf ball in my hands that I would literally just be rolling around. And I would pound through shows so fast. It was a really fun experience. I felt very connected to that character. I felt very into it at the time. So, yeah.
Yeah. It was a great character. Even the design of him, was these red aviator suit, big scarf. That's such
big junky boots, and yeah,
everything was junky on him. He's just he's a big broad dude.
Yeah,
all right.
I love it.
So, we start every episode of this podcast, I would like you to tell me, what is your definition of AI?
My definition of AI is it is a tool. It's a tool. It's a universal tool that allows, in a creative sense, the artist to save their best creative mojo for in a very precise way, in a very specific way, as opposed to just doing all the heavy lifting. And I think that goes from art, animation, to music, to voiceover, to I see the potential. I see the scariness of it. But I think if we get ahead of that, any new technology is a little bit scary. I go back to the Luddites, who were afraid of the loom. People wanted to make their rugs by hand. And now you think of that process and you go, oh, what an arduous process. But it still exists if you want to get that handcrafted rug, but you're going to pay for it because of the time it takes. So really, I don't think certain art or anything is, I don't think things are going anywhere. I think there will be an appreciation for it. It just sort of allows you to get rid of some of the heavy lifting, the stuff that you wouldn't want to do anyway. And we're already doing it, in a sense. We're not necessarily using a computer. Well, we are using computers to do it, but the computer isn't generating it. But most certainly we are. I go back to the old Scooby-Doo series by Hanna-Barbera, or Justice League, or Super Friends. And they had their running, say Scooby-Doo, they'd have the running scene where the
run
whole
cycle
was running, and they just use that animation over and over and over and over and over, and it was to eliminate the heavy lifting of having to draw it and redraw it every time. So
Sure. It was cost saving measure, right?
yeah,
They just use the same cycles over and over again. And like Disney used it in like the 70s with what were they doing? Like the Jungle Book. They
yes,
with the Robin Hood movie, they took the dance sequence of Baloo the bear dancing and they used it in Robin Hood for the what's his name? Little John.
yeah.
It's the exact same animation, they just traced over top of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy, and they did it in Alice in Wonderland. They just used that would they rotoscoped it, right? Like it was actually
Yeah.
footage of somebody of an actor performing and them just animating over it.
Yeah,
But well,
the
hey, it
actress going
works.
down that hole. Yeah, you're like, whatever, fine.
Now you
Whatever
can't.
to save money.
That back then they knew you couldn't go back and check. You couldn't.
Right. Yeah. It was you were one and done. That was it.
Yeah, it was it. You went and that was it. There was no like you couldn't even go to like the Blockbuster video, which is now gone. But that you couldn't go and compare movies side by side. It was they knew that they're like, oh, this worked. Let's just do it again.
Yeah.
It's a bit soul, but
Go ahead, sorry.
it's a bit soul sucking, but it worked.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it works.
Each sequence of that animation is beautiful in its own way.
Mm-hmm. It
Uh,
is. Like it still holds up to this day. Like Alice in Wonderland is still regarded as like one of the most beautiful animations of like the golden era of Disney.
mm-hmm.
But like yeah, like you said, like they did some cheats, which is like rotoscoping and stuff like that. But no one really thinks about it, right? They're just like, oh no, it's beautifully animated, which
Yeah, but
is like,
beautiful stuff lasts. Like,
it's true.
there's a reason they don't air those like old Super Friends episodes because they're terrible. Like they look
Yeah,
terrible, and these are DC characters like Superman. They look terrible. It would lose the audience immediately. But then
right.
you look at the Fleischer Superman and
Mhm.
the detail, and that holds up, and that is in the
Oh,
pantheon
yeah,
of classic animation and will always be there. So for the quick churn out stuff that doesn't matter,
yeah,
you know, you know, I don't know. I'm totally split on it. Like part of me is like, I
right.
see the problem. I see the problem. But the creative side goes, okay, let's get ahead of it. How do we get ahead of it? How do we use this as a tool? How do we use it in a way that to so that so for example, I think that I'm getting ahead of one of your questions.
All right, it's all
Probably.
great. It's okay. We'll just keep going into it. It's all good.
Okay, so you're like, oh, in voice acting, do you experience this? Well, kind of, yes. For instance, on the Snoopy Show, I play Woodstock. Woodstock makes a lot of like
I
funny,
believe she meant
chirpy
me.
noises, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of
Let's take a
repetition.
look.
In
It'll
fact,
be
one of the
fun.
charms of the show is that like when Woodstock loses it on Snoopy with his like it loses his mind, they use it the same sounds. They want the same sounds, and that's part of the charm. He loses it in the same way every time. It also speaks to him as a bird, but I think they are hearkening back to the original specials where Bill Melendez, like he would literally record it and animate it and just used all the same stuff over and over again. Probably because he was like, I don't want to go back in the studio. Let's just use that. But there is a charm to it. So in
Mhm.
the first few seasons, you're building up all of this library of Woodstock dialogue reactions. And now they're at the point where they can churn out specials and I'll just get sent a check because they've just used the library. There are actors who don't like that. I know some well-known actors who demand that they go in and re-record every time. But being
Mhm.
that I have other things on the go, and am a writer and things like that, I am appreciative of the fact that they can just draw on that library and use that, and I don't have to drive down to the studio and find parking and get a babysitter and and then come back. It just made my life a little easier. So because they're using it as a tool. So yeah, the one I may sound like what's his name, Kent Brockman from The Simpsons, the anchor, who's like, and I for one Welcome,
Yeah.
our insect overlords. And maybe we'll look back on this and laugh, and they'll be like, "Oh, Tinkler, what a fool you were. You're gruel." Because that's all you can afford now. But no, there's a way to sort of get on, to use it to your advantage versus being a victim to it or being exploited by it. There's always going to be exploitation. There's always going to be artists getting exploited. It doesn't matter if somebody finds a clip art on Google and then uses that on their poster or their whatever, like their art project. They're still taking that art. It's going to happen. The artist's going to get paid for it. What we probably need is some kind of like, you own your image or you own your voice um, law mandate, but that would
Okay.
be something that you would lobby for, so that nobody can come along and take your face and put it on in an ad.
Right.
It still happens. There's always the people who are going to exploit it, but
Yeah, there was a South Park episode about that where it was, what was it? One of the characters, Randy, the dad, was revealed in one of the seasons to be Lord the singer, and like the music company owns the rights to all past musicians. So you had like Kurt Cobain like selling
right.
shotguns and stupid stuff like that. But but it was one of those questions that I was thinking about, which is like, it was the first time I had this thought was when I was watching Rogue One, where they
Right.
had like a digital copy of Peter Cushing's and Carrie Fisher after they passed,
Yes.
right? So it's like, okay, where's the line between the person and the character? Like,
Right.
how much can you get Peter Cushing's to just advertise, Disney parks? You know what I mean? So my question is like, what are the ethical and potential misusage of these technologies, like deepfakes, for actors like yourself?
Yeah, I remember that Rogue One scene and being so excited
Yeah,
because
same. I was like,
I was
it's great.
excited
It's
not by
cool.
that image, but it was the lead up to that image where Darth Vader entered that shuttle, the Rebel
Oh,
shuttle, and
yeah.
started like killing Rebel soldiers in such a violent way that they didn't show in Star Wars. And you're like, that's why
No.
everyone's scared of him. That's why.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was obviously a stuntman in that, but then they
Yeah.
cut to Carrie Fisher, and you're like, oh, it's Carrie.
Oh.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
the
It's like a
uncanny
rubber.
valley
It's like a rubbery. It's like a rubber face version of
dead
her. You're like,
face.
oh.
I mean, nah, rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah.
Um, it was immediately disconcerting. For a glimpse, for a glance, it was like, same thing in the new Indiana Jones movie where they showed young
Oh,
version of
okay.
him, super excited, and then he
Yeah.
came out of the shadows, and you were like, okay, maybe cut now, maybe just like just maybe
or just
stand over, just
slink back in the shadows a bit or something.
yeah, just a little bit, just a little bit. It's
Yeah.
it's weird, but the unfortunate thing is those things take you out of the movie. They don't put
Right.
you in those. They're trying to immerse you into the world, and it does the opposite. It makes you think like, is that CG? And
Yeah.
you don't want your audience. You just want them in for the story. And which brings me
Right.
to the other saving grace, which is authenticity. I think as human beings, we will always crave authenticity. Um,
Mhm.
Once upon a time, some genius invented the greeting card for Mother's Day that said the most perfect thing that you could say to your mother, because you're either don't want to say it because you're too embarrassed, you couldn't think of the words, um, whatever your reason is, but it's the perfect word. But if you don't write something on there, your mom is going to hate you. If you don't sign your name or say something as you hand it over, you're dead. Greeting cards are great. They're everywhere. It's like the norm on every birthday, holiday, whatever, to hand over a greeting card. Uh, but humans seek that. It's like, where's the authenticity? Where's the XO I love you on there? And sometimes that's all it needs. But yeah, I think same thing happened in music. Like we all, like when digitized music came in and canned beats and things like that, we came to appreciate the subtle, with a live drummer, the fact that his humanity makes his pace slow a little bit through a song and then catch up again. We like those things. We are imperfect as humans, and we love those imperfections. I mean, really, those CG like Rogue One or the Indiana Jones movie, like they're like, okay, how do we make this less perfect? How do we bring out those imperfections? We want this to look, no, we don't want it to look beautiful. We actually want it to look, we're not shitty, but you want it to look flawed. Because it's those flaws that the eye twitch and the jerky like eye movement, or the subtle gasping or drawing a breath, or those things that are authentic, that we go, that's real. I feel connected to that.
Right.
People
It's like
went back to vinyl too. I mean, vinyl, for all its perfect, it is imperfect in many, less perfect on the surface than the digital technology, which basically takes the audio and squashes it and compresses it and makes a small file that you can carry 1 million songs. But people want that. They want the real thing.
yeah. You're right. People crave authenticity, but they also crave bigger and more. Like a good example of that is the new LED wall sets they use called Stagecraft. They use it in like The Mandalorian and like the Fablemans and stuff like that, where
Yeah.
it projects these large rendered scenes with proper lighting, so that actors can realize what they're acting against. And versus like Ewan McGregor in the Clone Wars, just the blue screen and looking like, I'm just gonna dodge things, I guess, and trying their best. You know what I mean?
Right.
So with that thought of authenticity, can you think of any good uses for AI in your opinion when it comes to helping actors?
I think that's a great one, because if you're putting your, I know people that have worked on The Mandalorian, and they're like, what do they call it? It's not the void. They call it the.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what it was
It's
called.
like a word that is the sounds, that is the stage, and they have props and furniture, and then a real time view of whatever planet they're on, or the office, or whatever, the star field, and it helps them be authentic, versus on a blue screen where you're like, the director comes up, he's like, okay, this is what the reindeer look like. Okay, they are running at you. Okay, so act like they're, versus like being able to, react in real time to that, and use that previs to help, and then they augment it in post and get rid of all the seam lines and things like that. I think that is so incredibly useful for bringing out an authentic performance. Yeah, and like, let's face it, I think those things, that you hear stories about those directors that are like Oliver Stone was really like, he was really mean, and would say horrible things to the actors, and then they'd roll. And if you could, it's because you're trying to put them into the battle, right? And so you're like trying to get them there. You want them, and but if you can put them in the battle, at least looking around, so that they can have a little more empathy, or identify with it more, you're going to get that realism. I mean, the abuse on set will drop significantly.
Like I always hear like horror stories of Kubrick and Shelley Duvall during The Shining, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like 250 takes. You're like, and he's like, no, again. You're like, ugh.
Right. Or like Steven Spielberg using like big teddy bear, like to Drew Barrymore, like in E.T., like to so that she would look and go, wow, like authenticity. It's all in seeking authenticity. So I mean, I have seen people, they have voice programs that can basically, you can read into the voice program and it can emulate your voice. But from an acting point of view, that would allow you to submit yourself for 50 auditions a day. Like I wouldn't have enough time in the day to do that. But if the
Right.
computer did, and then I can go, and then you get a call
Hmm.
back or you get the gig, then you can do the gig authentically. So it there's like, yeah, you can use it as a tool, or you can run in fear like we're all
Misuse
gonna
it.
die.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I, for
Yeah, you're
one,
not wrong.
welcome our insect overlords.
So like you were saying, like there's that program that can record your voice and then send it out to a bunch of auditions, right? Is that your only personal experience with in the industry with AI, with voice
That
acting?
I have seen so far, yes. I mean, I've seen it
Okay.
in movies. I've seen like extras. Like there was like a still frame that I saw on one of the socials where it was like people sitting in a crowd of like in a basketball, like in a gymnasium, and like a crowd on like little stands, and the front row was like real people clapping, and the row, and then there were people back that were real, but the row behind was like like full bad the Rock in Scorpion in the Mummy, the Scorpion King, like bad.
Oh.
You're in a shot
Mm.
where you're not looking,
Yeah.
But again,
Hmm.
that's an extra that's losing a job that,
Right.
um, but you know, um, maybe it will, because it allows us to do this heavy lifting. It will enable us to, like, as long as they're getting paid. Like
Right.
if you sell your image and
Hmm.
do a three-dimensional scan and get compensated every time for that usage, you don't have to show up. Like, everybody wants a 4-day work week. That that is what will happen.
That'll help. Yeah. Like at least they're hopefully paying the actors. It's not like they're using like a generative text to voice and just
Right.
like, no, we're not gonna pay actors then. Right. Because like that's when I heard, like, I did, I think 2 episodes, I did like a whole episode of just a text to voice and trying to sell myself as someone who's not really someone.
How did it work? Did
And
it work?
my
I
whole
didn't.
yeah, it was like episode 6. It was like, it was decent, but if you didn't know, like if you weren't paying attention, you'd be like, oh, that's a real person, because it sounds pretty effective. And
Really.
I just like, I took myself, put myself in a hoodie, and then
Hmm.
did like that witness protection thing where you just black out the figure, so you just have the silhouette,
Right.
right? And it's pretty. If you don't know the trick, you're like, I think it's like, I had a couple people like, oh, I thought it was a real person for at least 20 minutes of the podcast, and I was like,
Really.
then I was like, well, then it was effective then.
Yeah. So if you can get them to pay you for your voice print or your image, I think that's where. But they're going to do it anyway. Like, I mean, there's always like, it's the classic story of the artist getting screwed over. It's the Nike swoosh. It's on every Nike product, and that woman made what, $40, and
Something like that,
it's the uh, there was a voice that was, it was like one of those, like, it was a big corporation. Their voice used in basically all their interface stuff. Like if you needed help, I can't remember what the company was, but it was a big, and the actor got paid, but a pittance for
yeah. It
something
was
that
like,
was used millions of times. Like, and then they had no real recourse because
mhm.
technically the contract was signed. It was all above board, and they just didn't know what it was
Yeah,
for.
you got paid scale
Yeah,
for when you're
they just
contracted.
didn't know that it was for, and it was going to be used forever and ever until the end of time. And I don't know if the
Right.
corporation was shamed into switching it up and doing something different, but there are always those stories. There are always going to be those stories.
Yeah, there's always gonna be people that are gonna, skirt around the rules or try to make a quick profit doing, the shadiest kind of methods.
Right,
But like that's never gonna change. Like from animation to acting to anything in the entertainment industry, there's always bad actors and, people that are up and up, the good
right.
actors type of thing.
So when
Uh,
like, even from a writing standpoint,
mhm.
again, you can get that first draft. You can, do the beats and then get that first draft, out the barf draft, and then you can just edit it.
Yeah.
and put in
Yeah.
the authenticity. It'll be interesting going back to voice. It'll be interesting to see if people do seek authenticity, if that will culturally change us. Like if
Mm.
if if the reads are all really smooth and musical and welcome to the smooth
Yeah.
sound, whatever, maybe we will change the cadence of our voice to speak in a way that is in you cannot copy this, but then all of a sudden you're doing something different because there's authenticity in that. And we're
Yeah.
like, we love that. Oh, it's so real and unpredictable and all those things. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
The music of the language
But
can
like
change.
when I did, yeah, like when I did that episode, I don't know, I spent like hours just fixing cadences, like adding extra space because every space was like an extra time, but delivery would be different. So sometimes I had to like make the word one word with no spacing, so it would
Oh,
understand like it flows like that. But it was like, okay, now I'm just engineering speech now. And I'm like, okay, so it was very it was at the end of the day, I was like, am I really saving? Like, would you really be saving time and money, or would it be easier just to get an authentic voice to get what you want? Maybe do like 2 or 3 passes. I'm like,
yeah,
okay,
for sure.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So I guess my question I have is, with stuff like out there like that, like the generative text and stuff like that, what safeguards and regulations do you think should be put in place for actors, voice actors like yourself?
um, yeah, well, like like some kind of mandate to like I can't sort of like you own your own image, you own your own voice,
Hmm.
law,
Hmm.
something. And we haven't really conceived of that, and it might affect the general public. Like for instance, when somebody posts on the socials, they no longer own that image. That's no longer belongs to them. It belongs to this social media, and they can use it as they wish in promotion and all that sort of stuff. So I think it actually affects everyday people more than they think, more than it matters to them. But if your kid is like, if your kid shows up in an ad and you're like, what, and it's because
Yeah.
they got something off of. I remember like years ago, my aunt was flipping through a magazine and came across a picture of her son, my cousin, and she was like, what? And it was him, and he was holding a leaf, and he was looking at the camera, and it was like some guy, Shutterbug photographer or whatever, took a picture of it. That would never happen now, or couldn't,
No. Yeah.
but it found it in the magazine, and I think those things do happen. So I think people will feel like, yeah, I got to protect my image. I don't want my, I don't want my image to show up in deepfakes or
Yeah.
ads for things. Yeah,
Yeah. Like that. Yeah. Voice samplings and all that
yeah.
stuff.
So it could affect a
So,
broad swaths of people. It might not be as niche as just actors.
right. Yeah, for sure. Like, even, like, I know that's primarily why, like, Disney, like, there's a long thing in animation where the rights to Mickey Mouse should have expired in like the 90s, and then they forced Congress to like extend it, and then
Right.
they extended it for like 30 years, and
Okay.
then I think they extended it again by
Mm,
like, some like, it's like technically Mickey Mouse should be in public domain. I think it's you get
right.
100 years for that character, and then everything goes into public domain. That's why like you can have Popeye's supplement Jim everywhere, because it's technically Popeye is a public domain character.
Really,
And
I
I'm like,
didn't
oh,
know
okay.
that.
Yeah, so it's supposed, or like Tarzan. That's why you can have variations of Tarzan. Like, there's all those like
Right.
Tarzan movies because
Sherlock
technically he's
Holmes.
public domain.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's designed to like make it more, you can innovate with this.
With Mickey Mouse, it's interesting because it is such a specific part of their brand, and they actively use it.
Right.
It's not like this thing that like,
Yeah.
hey, Popeye, are they creators still using it? Is there a
Yeah.
Popeye Park? Is there Popeye? Like it's one of
It's
those
not a
things where
brand.
it's not a brand, but this is kind of associated with their brand. So my guess is they're probably going to find a way to extend it again. So people will
Oh, yeah.
have to wait
They'll use those Mickey bucks.
on those bootleg Mickey T-shirts with him with his head on, I don't know, Jabba the Hutt or something.
Sure, something else they own. Sure, why not?
Right.
So it seems like through this conversation that even with the costs of productions increasing, at the end of the day, the consensus seems to be people crave authenticity, not
Yes.
just, not just, not just like not just costs becoming lower and like making things easier with AI. Like AI can do great things.
Mm-hmm.
Like a good perfect example is like there's tons of AI art out there,
Mm-hmm.
but it all starts to look the same and doesn't. There's no style difference. There's no everything's very smooth and polished. There's no
Mm-hmm.
style. It's just like, oh, it's so there's it harkens back to authenticity. Uh, so with acting, do you believe that's the same thing where people are just going to crave authenticity and that's something that a machine cannot replicate?
I do. I mean, it's the difference between. Do you remember that scene in was it which Thor was it at Ragnarok where Matt Damon was playing Loki, and it was like these street performers, and
Yeah,
they're
yeah, they're like a theater. They're like a
performing
theater
and
company or something like
doing
that.
the thing, and it's
Yeah.
I feel like it's like that, you know. If I'm going through, like, if I'm on social media and I'm looking at, you want. I always stop at like artists, like drawing, like a hand drawings. I'm like, oh my god, I gotta watch this. Like, I can't not watch it because you
Mhm.
see, and then you see them make a little flub, and then they fix it, and then or you see the process, the evolution. I don't know that you could, versus like a AI generated work of art that's like slowly pixel by pixel being revealed.
Yeah.
Um, I'm less likely to stop at that. It's like even from a negative point of view, like they say, like a baby crying is like it shakes us to our core. That's why people get so
Yeah.
frustrated on planes. I never get frustrated on planes with babies because I had babies, so I'm always like, that baby's hungry. I'm always analyzing the baby. Crying. Like, oh, that baby's sleeping. No, what he's wearing is itchy. Take it off. He's
Yeah.
wearing a sweater. But it rattles them to the core, and it's like because there's the humanity behind it. It's like we're hardwired to look for that authenticity, and when we see Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia computer generated, we go, "Ugh!" we have the exact opposite effect.
It's
It's
true.
revulsion
Hmm.
uh, to the to it. And I have to say, some of the AI generated art, it's a bit revolting. Like, and not even the
Yeah.
context of it, not even like it's not even a revolting picture of something disgusting happening. It's like,
Hmm.
you know, uh, Adam West as a child dressed as Batman, like as though he grew
Yeah.
up. But it's like there's something to it that just maybe is creepy.
Yeah, it
Feels
reminds me of those. It reminds me of those kids' books where you flip the top and you put like a hat on a cowboy and it's like
yeah,
mixed with an astronaut versus like
yes,
duck boots. And you're like,
yes.
what is this?
Yeah,
But it's like made real, and you're like,
you're
oh,
looking at it like this is not versus I don't know. It's a tool
yeah,
like Photoshop. If you use it like Photoshop, uh,
yeah, yeah,
it can make artists' lives easier.
yes. We just got to figure out how to use it properly and
How
how to
to
use it
I
effectively.
would agree with that, and
Yeah,
I think it's like it comes down to uh, you owning your own image or your own voice or your own art. You own it.
yeah, perfect. As we're wrapping things up, is there anything we missed or you'd like listeners to know about?
No, I think we talked about everything. That's thank you for talking about. Thank you for mentioning my book. It is out now.
Yeah, perfect.
And if you want to just try it out, there's a podcast called Eight Tiny Reindeer, which is what the book is, the graphic novel is based on. And so you can listen to that for free, or if you got kids or something like that, and who aren't like necessarily like into reading, they can listen to the podcast and read the book, and sort of.
Perfect. Thanks again, Rob, for doing this.
You bet.
Well, that's it. I want to thank our guests for contributing on our journey so far, and I want to thank you, the phantom listeners, for hearing us ramble around the water cooler. Come check in next time as we talk more about the subject of AI in the animation industry. Let's find out together. Don't forget, keep your eyes on the horizon.